Good, good. Well, welcome everybody. It is nice to be back, but I would have preferred to stay away. But what can we do? Some of us have to work for a living, I suppose. So yeah. Look at Trevor. Yeah. Well, we can do what we can do. So traditions and norms, Lee. I think it was something along those sort of lines. I sort of picked up your email and had a quick look at it. So what are we doing? Are we trapped by our social conventions and cultural traditions, or whether they stabilize our society and culture by giving behavioral landmarks? I prefer physical landmarks. Behavioral landmarks, I suppose, are something completely different. But cultural norms and traditions. Well, we've got a few different cultures on the chat this morning, so I suppose this is going to be an interesting one. So, Lee, over to you.
Thanks, Ivan. You picked up the baton very quickly. So obviously the holiday's done you good. And when you read that sentence, I thought, oh, what was I even saying? So it came from Edward, so we should really pass it on quite quickly to him. But I did love the topic. What is it that our conventions or our traditions do in terms of our thinking and behavior? Do they limit us? Do they trap us? Or are they kind of the way sort of like pegs that we can give us some certain boundaries maybe, or ways of seeing that we can actually follow? And I think about, so as you all know, I'm the rules girl. So head girl at primary school, head girl at high school, and that comes because I'm a good rule follower and I make other people follow the rules. In fact, one of the things that I was when I was head girl at high school, I put friends of mine, close friends of mine, in detention because they were late for assembly. And that was like, you just don't do that because they're your friends. And it didn't make me friends with them for a long time. And so my strong sense of what is right and wrong and following what is expected is deeply, deeply entrenched in me. But I love people who are unconventional. So people who don't follow the rules, people who step out of line, people who challenge the status quo, I find fascinating and am drawn to them. Very, very, I just find them fascinating. But I also realize that their stepping out and doing things differently comes at a cost to them in terms of what society expects, that they do feel like outsiders. They do feel that they are, I was listening, I love these artistic shows, and I'm watching Glow Up at the moment. So there are these certain shows that I can watch on my own without my husband. So Queer Eye is one of them, and Glow Up is the other one, where it's a makeup artists, and these are people who, to become a makeup artist, especially there's one woman who's from Hong Kong, and she's in Chinese culture, you don't become a makeup artist, especially if you come from a high-end family where doctors and lawyers and accountants and business executives is the order of the day. And she introduces herself by saying, I'm the black sheep of the family. And so I realize it comes at huge cost. And so then there's just two other things I wanted to say. The one is that besides my own personal sense, I think there's certain conventions that just oil the wheels of society, that it's better just to go with the flow. because of the pushback. And I just think the simplest one I can think of is picking your nose. Like, it's really, it's one of the things you kind of have to teach your children fairly early on in life, that as wonderful as it may feel, this is not an acceptable practice. So let's figure out pretty soon how best not to do that. And then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, I've just read an article that the suicide rate of women in Japan has increased by 17% in 2020 because of COVID, because of the isolation, and because of the amount of expectations that are on them from both a work perspective and a care perspective. And the culture in Japan is stoic, is I don't say what I'm thinking or feeling, and I've got to keep it together. And the cultural norm to keep the level of self-control is so great that it does literally trap these women in themselves, that they feel that their only way out is to end their own lives. So that's my thoughts on the subject.
Thanks, Lisa. Now we all know you better behave yourselves, otherwise you get put in detention by the head girl. So just no thinking out the box, no breaking the rules, please. You know, everybody toe the line this morning and behave yourselves nicely. Don't want to get into trouble. So Ed, we better go across to you and see if you're going to be the good boy this morning.
First of all, can I apologise for raising this subject? I've never heard Lee speak so long in the opening. And then when I got that email, I thought, boy, Lee should be a consultant. Words like, was it behavioural architecture or something, or behavioural buildings? I don't know. I haven't. But what I love about Wisdom's chats is it makes you think about lots and lots of different things. I wrote some notes down last night about what I'm going to say this morning, and I've actually had to add a word because of what Lee said. So my notes read: tofu, granddad, sister, footpaths, surfing, virgin, parliament. Where else could you get all those in one conversation? And it all started because both Frank and Lee yesterday said it was too early to talk about certain subjects. And I thought, well, why is it too early to talk about the subject? And it made me think about breakfast, because I have my breakfast after this meeting. And as a good card-carrying vegan, I have scrambled tofu. Now, during lockdown, I also started subscribing as a treat to these recipe boxes, and they send you all the ingredients, and I cook something for my evening meal, and I love it. But one time there was a curry, and one of the side dishes was scrambled tofu. And I really didn't enjoy that meal, because to me, tofu is for breakfast, not for dinner. And it really threw me. It really threw me. And I then thought, well, how are we trapped by our conventions? Are they good or are they bad? And my grandfather was a Church of England vicar, but he wasn't very religious. And the reason he was a vicar was because I think he was the third born. And in his sort of, he was quite posh. And at his time, the first son went in the army, the second son went into medicine, and the third son went into the church. So his life was ruled by convention. And then I thought about my family and sort of 2 generations later. And it was the same in most families in the UK at the time. I was expected to sort of get an education, do well, and earn a living. And my sister was expected to get married. And that was the convention then. And conventions change. Unfortunately, that's not the case now. But we still have the convention that hereditary titles only pass down the male line. So if you've got a lord and a lady, it's only the son that takes the title. The daughter doesn't take the title. And then I thought about, we talked about surfing before, and the etiquette. And I think etiquette is a branch of convention, and the etiquette of who takes the wave. And that's designed to, and Trevor's shaking his head here because he was a rebel and didn't follow the etiquette. But you know, that was designed to stop accidents. And a lot of conventions are designed to stop accidents. And we then become trapped in this convention, and it holds us back perhaps. And then I remember when Virgin Money first came into to financial services, the financial service world, everyone wore a tie and a jacket because it said, I'm one of you, you're safe with me, I fit in, I'm not going to rock the boat, so you can do business with me. Virgin wanted to make a statement so that they all turned up to meetings, to conferences, to events with no jacket on and no tie. And they did get noticed, but they were outsiders. They were never in the inner circle. And eventually, all the Virgin guys started wearing jackets and ties, which I found quite interesting. And then the footpaths that came in when Lee was talking about things was, I took a friend of mine walking on Dartmoor, and we sort of walked along to this wood that I'm very fond of. And then we were going to go to the highest point on Dartmoor. So I just cut straight across the hillside. And it just freaked this guy out because he'd never, ever done anything other than walk on a footpath. He'd never been in an environment where you could choose your own route. And you can go anywhere on Dartmoor. It's what they call open access. You can go wherever you like. Most of the UK, you have to follow a public right of way. You have no access over most land. And this just changed him totally. All his life, he'd followed the rules. And then I'd showed him that there are places where you don't need to follow the rules. And just that one simple thing of not following a footpath changed his life totally. Unbelievable, because he was a rule follower until he broke the rules and realized you can break the rules. And then, of course, in the UK, we do not have a written constitution. Our whole parliamentary procedure, our whole democracy relies on convention. Some of those conventions are pretty weird, and some are very important because it makes the whole thing work. And it wouldn't work if it wasn't. For example, we have what's called the Speaker of the House. He's non-political. He's an MP, but he doesn't take sides. And he's a very powerful figure. And he's elected by the House. Every time there's a national election, no one stands against him in his parliamentary seat by convention, because it means that he still keeps his job. Other conventions, you might have seen them on TV when there's a state opening of Parliament. There's a guy called Black Rod, or can be a woman as well, because we did have a woman one a few years back. Is the sort of leader of the master of ceremony of the House of Lords. And that we have the House of Lords full of non-elected people and the House of Commons elected people. And the state opening, Black Rod goes from the House of Lords to the House of Commons. When he gets there, they slam the door in his face. And then he bangs on the door 3 times with his rod. They open the door and he invites some more to go to the House of Lords to hear the Queen's speech. And that's been going on for ages. And it's really important because it symbolizes the fact that the democracy is separate from the monarchy. The Queen never goes in the House of Commons. She's actually technically allowed in the House of Commons, but she never goes in there. And that convention is important to support the democracy, the separation of the crown from the people. And there's other conventions as well. You're not allowed to call anyone in the house a liar. You call them by their title, not by their name. So you'd say, and you wouldn't say Boris Johnson is a lying toad, even though he is. You'd say the right honourable gentleman for, and you name his constituency, is being disingenuous. But it keeps order, it keeps balance. But I think in general, conventions can be a bad thing because they tie us down, they keep us to that footpath, and we don't discover the joy of having tofu in the evening.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, I always thought tofu was something you put in your shoes, but yeah, anyway, who knows? Have it for breakfast or something. That's a different way. So, Leo, yeah, convention. How does that one work for you?
It was such an interesting phrase as I read it that we had for today because I wasn't there yesterday. So, yeah, I've got a couple of thoughts around that. I think convention can be good and it can be bad. In that we can often be stuck in our traditions. So I'm a first generation South African. My parents are both Dutch, and my mother was proudly Dutch. So much so, you know, that I mean, there was just one way, and it was the Dutch way. And so when I got married to an English person, and Mom came to visit me, I mean, you know, I got it in the neck because I wasn't putting out the peanuts, you know, which was kind of the Dutch way, you know. And I think then I think convention can be challenging, like even in our beliefs and our many of us won a trip to go to Thailand in terms of Sportron, and there was a strong Christian culture in Sportron, and many people didn't go to Thailand because of its Buddhist nature, and now because the devil was going to get them, you know. And I think that's for me very challenging and narrow-minded. Dad, I mean, was also probably stuck in some kind of norms and traditions. You know, he strongly urged me not to get divorced because I'd be the first one in the whole family to have got divorced. And so he was wrestling with that. I think convention for me, you know, still, you know, okay, so I'm 63, still maybe a bit old-fashioned. I still open the door for a lady, you know, still pull the chair out. But I can remember when I was at varsity doing, you know, a postgrad, you know, and I opened the door for a lady. I didn't realize she was a hairy-legged lady, but I got it in the neck. How dare I open the door, you know, how dare I demean her like this? And I'm thinking, what? You know, I'm actually respecting you. So, you know, there was a bit of a challenge around that. And then the last one I wanted to mention is, again, culturally, cultural traditions can have challenging aspects around norms. In the Dutch culture, we've got a celebration called St. Nicholas on the 5th of December. But St. Nicholas comes with Black Peter. And in today's world, that could be a very racist thing. While in the whole symbolic thing there was, I mean, you know, St. Nicholas was a bishop and he was a Moor, you know, he did missionary work in the Moor, and Black Peter was a Moor, you know, he just happened to be a Moor, you know, it wasn't necessarily black, but I suppose it could have been while he was the slave servant of the bishop. So and you know, every year there's a huge uproar in Holland, you know, about Black Peter. You know, I mean, they've already made Black Peter ladies, and now they're painting them green, and so, you know, so it's all quite interesting how they're going to deal with that tradition, you know, because it's a very strong tradition to celebrate that celebration in Holland, and you know, with all the Syrians coming over and a stronger multicultural perspective happening, it could be interesting to see what happens with that tradition. You know, I mean, I think the Dutch are trying to fight it. You know, you're coming to our country. This is our, if you don't like it, leave our country type stuff, you know, and so how do you become inclusive? So I don't know the answers to that, but that's just my little aspect around norms and traditions and conventions. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Leo. Yeah, it is interesting where some of these things come from, and yeah, what's happening to them in this world of increasingly PC-edness. There's such a word as that. I think. You know, I don't know what else to call it because, yeah, or like I could think of other things to call it, but probably wouldn't be polite on this forum. But so yes, I better get across to you so someone can be polite at least. Yeah.
I think the honorable chair is disingenuous for calling me polite. So no, I think I'm with Ed on this one in terms of amazing how a simple topic can take you through the whole gambit of almost life experiences and social experiences. So in just putting down my notes, I first put down religious because that's the context in which I basically grew up, with my dad being a pastor. And it was literally just the accepted norm. And if you're a Christian, this is the way of living. And men don't have long hair. Women wear hats. You never go without something on your head. And then women don't wear pants. So that you can remember that tradition. So that was the context in which I grew up. And when I was a young man, the next thing was, you don't dance. Dance is sin. Later on, you know, we made jokes about it. You can dance, just don't enjoy it. And then don't go to movies. Movies is also sin. And nowadays, I mean, you're just so flooded with TV and stuff like that. So almost like Edward's young man's experience of breaking out of the worn path to discover, hey, there is fun in the bush out there, and it's actually a shortcut, and we can have fun. So I went through that whole thing of becoming a sinner in terms of all those religious taboos. But then I think in a more serious note, with COVID and the change of the economy, one of the unspoken conventions is that men are the breadwinners. But what if a man loses his job? What if he can no longer be the breadwinner? And I think initially one accepted it, but if it goes on for long, that certainly does something to the man's image. Convention. Then I was thinking about food. The privilege of traveling all over Africa and also overseas. And I was just reminded when Liu talked about people winning trips to Thailand. That was my best trip when we went to Thailand. It's a great country. But I'm just thinking of the conventional foods. And I don't like spicy food. But the Indians and some other countries, that's just the culture. The more spicy it is, the more you're closer to tradition. And then I was thinking of in the South African context, when I just entered the work environment and I started to reach out and met people from different cultures, how I was groomed that if you're honest, you look a guy in the eye and you talk to him. Whereas there are cultures in South Africa where it's, what do you call it, discourteous to look them straight in the eye. So instead of looking in the eye, you show respect by not looking them in the eye, looking on the ground. But for another person who don't know that it's actually courteous, it's seen as you're dishonest or not serious about what you're doing. The same with a handshake. I hate a limp handshake, but in some cultures, it's you know, I'm not aggressive by having a limp handshake. So I think there might be many more such cultural differences. And then I'm thinking about another convention that we just accept. And when Liu talked about St. Nicholas, You know, we've got Easter bunnies that lays eggs. How does that make sense? But we accept it, and I personally like the Easter egg. It's part of the treat when it comes Easter time, or we just accept it. So without having an opinion on it, I'm just putting out there what is currently happening around us, and our life carries on.
Great. So thanks for that, Jasper. Yeah. So Trevor, I'm keeping my hands in my pockets and my eyes averted just to make sure that nothing is confrontational. But you know, it could lead you down a completely different path. So, Trevor, yeah, man with his own culture.
Well, being a saint, I have no idea what you people are talking about. So I'm just going to shake my head whenever Ed talks about the etiquette in surfing. It's got nothing to do with etiquette in surfing. Ed, in the mid-60s, early 70s, quite simple. If you dropped in on anyone that had the wave, you'd get blitzened. And later on, that little convention got taken into championship surfing rules and regulations. Then it became etiquette. But before that, you got a smack. It was simple as that, and that's what sorted out the boys from the men in that environment. What else when it comes to conventions? Look, I grew up in a school where the worst thing that could happen to you is that you became a prefect, and God forbid that you became a head prefect, because you were just not going to make it with the rest of the terrors in the school. And it was such a well-recognized school that shortly after I left, they closed the school down and used the building for something else. So I'm one of the rare few that has come out of that school on the straight and narrow. And if you want to search it, it was called Mansfield High School. Everyone else feared the school in terms of rugby and all the sports. And then, of course, just to let Leo know that I know his parents well, is I toured in Holland in my young days, playing water polo. And of course, they issued us with a rule book, but in those days, no one ever played to the rules. So it was the same sort of philosophy as dropping in on someone else on the wave. You just got blitzened in those days. And I remember spending 3 odd weeks playing against, it was the Dutch team. They came third in the Olympic Games prior to when we went. That's why we went to go and see if we could play some decent water polo against them. And here's one for Lee. I remember being thrown into the pool against the Dutch women's team, and they blitzened us. They didn't understand the convention that women shouldn't beat men. They just gave us a hiding because they were so sophisticated. But I must admit, they ate a lot of cheese. And while we were trying to mark them, they shaved their legs. So their hairy legs were sticking into us all the time. No, they weren't. And don't tell any of those girls. I'm frightened of them in case they come and find us here. So conventions and rules. I've been a stickler for these my entire life. And I just don't know how to break free from conventions and rules. But I can't find where the book is on my shelf. So someone has taken it. I'm not going to refer to them at all. No, you've got to live a lifestyle where you take a decision, and those decisions might take you left or right. We've had this discussion. And the only rule you need to know is how do you respond in when you take either the left channel or the right channel. There are no rules written about things when you take channels that have not been taken before. So you've just got to respond to what you see in front of you. I don't know how you write rules for that type of individual.
And I don't know how to follow that up. So, you know, there's no rules to tell me where to go from here. So we're just going to...
Rule number 2.
Rule number 2. Yeah. When all else fails, refer to rule number 1.
Yep.
So, yeah, what was rule number 1? There are no rules. So, yeah, Okay, so well, might as well just finish off here then, because there are no rules, so we can just stop. No, just joke. Like I said, yeah, I think, you know, it becomes a challenge because, you know, certain parts of the world, society, have become so sensitive to this whole concept of political correctness, that you actually can find yourself tied in knots. You know, where do you actually go if you're trying to, you know, dance to the tune of the Japanese or the Taiwanese or the British, you know, British Parliament? I mean, you could come and give our guys a few lessons. Yeah, I mean, we have a written constitution, but nobody ever follows it, and they keep on changing it. So, you know, what does it matter? You know, these things. You've got a rule book. Well, you know, it's great. You know, we don't like rule number 2, so we're going to change it. Yeah, so let's make rule number 3. So it becomes a dance that you know. I think that there's that game called Twister. You know, you tie yourself in knots trying to put your hands and feet on different blocks on a piece of plastic. It sounds a bit like that to me. If you try and dance to all these different tunes, you're just going to get yourself tied in knots. So for me, it's about staying true to who you are, staying, you know, what you believe is integrity, what you believe is right. And unfortunately, at times that's going to offend some other people. But you know, you won't know that unless you've studied their culture, or unless they tell you. And if they tell you, you can say, well, you know, I'm sorry, this is who I am. It wasn't intended. But if they don't tell you, they go away offended, and it becomes their problem, not yours. So lots of different challenges in this space, I think. And yeah, at the end of the day, you just got to try and be the best you that you can be, I think. So on that note, Lee, back to you to put us all into tension, I think.
I have grown up a little bit since those days. and there is a convention which I am going to prompt now, and that is that it is my birthday today. So thank you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lee. Happy birthday to you.
Thanks, Leo. So I'm calling it my odd birthday because it's 57. So you can't get to odder numbers than 5 and 7. And really 57's in the middle of nowhere.
I thought it's just prime, Lee, so it's your prime birthday. I mean,
yeah. Oh, there you go. There you go. I'm definitely in my prime. and when so the convention in our family is to at least put a little bit of a birthday gift present list together, so people can give you something that's sort of more or less in line with what you want and not what they think you want. And I just had one thing on my list for this year, and that was a box of Lego. So I got the most magnificent, my husband's going to give it to me, thank you, the most magnificent box of Lego. And so now I'm going to play with my Lego, Harry Potter style. And so I'm learning a little bit about coloring out of the lines. So what do we do about tomorrow in terms of a topic? Trevor was talking about working from, yes, Paul Christopher, definitely. Trevor spoke about, you know, what is it, how are we figuring out this working from home? Is that where we want to go, or is there another topic coming out of today? I was thinking about, coloring out of the lines. I was thinking about what does it take for us to be the oddball or the odd one out, or you know, we talk about being unconventional, but you know, what does it take to step out of the trends, out of the mainstream? So I'm wondering if we just follow on a little bit from today around that topic. How does everybody feel?
Yeah, sounds good to me, Lee. I'm really interested to see how you're going to color with your Lego set, but that's not the line. But yeah, that's
very unconventional.
I'm going to put a link here that will stimulate some thinking. How guys like this are using the formats that we're using to make a fortune. Go and have a look at this guy, No Life Shack, and what he's doing online, and the music that he's listening to. And he is just building up millions of connections online by just reacting to old rock and roll music. So the music we grew up to, these youngsters, he's 26 years of age, he's starting to listen to it, and he's just blown away. And you have a look at his reactions and what's going on. And I think this is our future. So just turning conventional wisdom upside down is what these youngsters are doing. And we're right on top of it.
Great, thanks. Go and listen to some good rock and roll, break the rules, come back tomorrow and tell us what's been turned upside down for you, and we'll take it from there. So have a great day for the folks, and we'll see you on the morrow. Go well.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.